We're going to get a little vulgar here for a moment, but bear with me. There is a point in mind. You know how they say some guys are boob guys, some guys are butt guys, some guys apparently are feet guys. And I don't understand the mechanics of that, and I really don't want to, but for whatever reason, I guess that's a big thing in the internet age. The internet has done weird things to a lot of people, but you know what I love? You know what I really go for? A dull-eyed, wire-headed, lipless, arrhythmic femdom type who just refuses to brush her teeth. That's what gets me going, guys. Me and my buddy, Billy Wigglestick. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. My name is Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear, of course, in 3 playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being the poetry discussion playlist, now approaching 700 videos strong. Number 2 being William Shakespeare's sonnets, and number 3 being 30 must-read poems. The 30 must-read poem series have 3 parts to their videos. Number 1, after the intro, there will be a biography. After that, there will be a breakdown of the types of poems for which said poet is known. And the final portion of these videos is, of course, an analysis of the poem. So, who was William Shakespeare? William Giuseppe Shakespeare was born April 23, 1564, in Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, England. I have to admit, the English certainly do name their places much more elegantly than we do here in the United States. For example, Shakespeare is from Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, and I am from Kansas City, Missouri. Though I'll definitely take American food over theirs. Also, yes, I did make up a middle name because Shakespeare did not have one. Sue me. For reference, 1564 was the same year Galileo Galilei was born. It was the first time anyone documented a sighting of a rat king, and it was the year the Italian artist and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Michelangelo died. William's father, John, was a glover. No, not that Glover, a glove-making glover. He was also well regarded enough to serve as an alderman, a type of city councilman. Though, for reasons unknown to us, all that changed in the late 1570s. John lost his position as an alderman, and some illegal wool purchases cost his business as well, spiraling the family into harder conditions. Unfortunate indeed, but who is to say how much of the young playwright's sense of justice and tragedy were rooted here? And, perhaps, his propensity for writing royalty came from his mother, Mary Arden, themselves gentry, whose lineage is traceable all the way back to the Norman invasion of 1066. November 27, 1582, at 18 years old, William Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. No, not that Anne Hathaway, though I kinda like it. Historians often say things like, there may have been haste in this arrangement, haste in this marriage, because the marriage banns were only read once as opposed to the customary 3 times. How strange. There may have been haste to this marriage. Anne Hathaway gave birth to their first child, Susanna, 6 months later. I'll let you do the math on that. February of 1585, the Shakespeares had twins, Hamnet and Judith. Then Shakespeare, like Jesus, disappears from history for a few years, until he pops up in London in 1592, where he began playing Quidditch for Ravenclaw. Obviously, that's a joke. He was producing his plays on the big stage of London, and his education, or lack thereof, was getting him sneered at by the fancy quote-unquote university wits, as they have come to be known, like Christopher Marlowe, with Marlowe's fellow college boy, Robert Greene, not that one, saying, quote, "There is an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is as well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you, and being an absolute Johannes factotum, is in his own conceit the only shake scene in a country." With this quote, Greene had mocked Shakespeare on several levels, and even mocks a line from Shakespeare's Henry VI, where the tiger's heart is wrapped around a woman's hide. But by the time of that quote, Shakespeare's name was made, even if his reputation was not yet made as the greatest author of all time. A few years later, his son Hamnet would die of unknown causes, and it seems something snapped in William Shakespeare, as his most acclaimed works, including the ominously titled Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, Much Ado About Nothing, Measure for Measure, Midsummer Night's Dream, The Merchant of Venice, Othello, maybe Romeo and Juliet, as well as the form and genre-destroying portfolio of 154 sonnets, all followed that date. Despite the fact that William Shakespeare was already 32 years old when his son passed. All told, his works are believed to total between 37 and 39 plays, depending on where you're getting your facts, the aforementioned 154 sonnets, 2 long narrative poems, and myriad less famous poems. Not to mention he's believed to have invented or introduced 1,700-ish new words, including such bangers as bedroom, majestic, lonely, undress, critic, addiction, and Jessica. And how many words did Robert Greene coin? With his fancy pedigree from academe. Ooh, academe, that's another one. That one probably belongs to Shakespeare as well as the fact that Shakespeare was part owner in the Globe Theatre. In 1613, Shakespeare seems to have retired, though he may not have conceptualized it as such. Not long thereafter, he had a night out with the boys, those boys being Michael Drayton, a poet, and Ben Jonson, a poet and playwright in his own right. It is conjectured that that night went well, possibly too well, because Shakespeare caught a fever and died the next day, April 23rd, the day he's believed to have been born. But, 52 years later. In his will, he famously left his wife, Anne Hathaway, his second best bed. One must wonder if this is Shakespeare's notorious wit and cunning deployment of innuendo at work. The epitaph on his grave reads, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." So what kind of poems did Shakespeare write? Well, 154 of them were sonnets. What is a sonnet? The sonnet is a popular classical form that has compelled poets for centuries. Traditionally, the sonnet is a 14-line poem written in iambic pentameter, employing one of several rhyme schemes and adhering to a tightly structured thematic organization. The name is taken from the Italian sonetto, or sonetto, which means a little sound or song. But Shakespeare didn't write just any kind of sonnet. He wrote what is now known as a Shakespearean sonnet. Well, what's a Shakespearean sonnet? A variation on the Italian sonnet tradition. The form evolved in England during and around the time of the Elizabethan era. These sonnets are sometimes referred to as Elizabethan sonnets or English sonnets. Although Shakespeare's sonnets have prominently endured for centuries, he was hardly alone in his embrace of this poetic style. Many prominent English poets of the day, from John Donne to John Milton, also wrote sonnets. Shakespearean sonnets feature the following elements. They are 14 lines long. The 14 lines are divided into 4 subgroups. The first 3 subgroups have 4 lines each, which makes them quatrains, with the second and fourth lines of each group containing rhyming words. The sonnet then concludes with a 2-line subgroup, and these 2 lines rhyme with each other. A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. That is the rhyme scheme. They are typically 10 syllables per line, which are phrased in iambic pentameter. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips, red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare. Now, Sonnet 130. Most of the conversation surrounding this sonnet is kind of, it leaves me wanting, to be quite honest. You look this sonnet up, you find what people are saying about this sonnet, you look at academe about this sonnet, and the only thing they really want to talk about is one of 2 things. One, um, oh, this is a sonnet that upends the sonnet, the love poem. It puts it on its head. It is just that rascally old Shakespeare giving it the 1-2. It's the very uncompelling conversation, if you ask me. Obviously, this is different than a normal love sonnet. Obviously, what we're going to be talking about with some of these words is not what you would expect to find in a love poem. So, no, this isn't a regular sonnet. And you're going to find a lot of talk with this sonnet about whether or not this sonnet sort of describes Shakespeare's real life mistress. Anne Hathaway, the woman to whom he was married, seems to have been an unhappy marriage. So there's speculation over who this sonnet is about. I just don't see there being a whole lot of profitable discussion about this. I'm sure it's out there, right? I can never seem to find it. So here's what we're looking at. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes there is more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. Now, these things all sound very insulting. But there's a little bit of diction at play here. It's word choice more than anything. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. What is the sun like? Bright? Is that what we're talking about here? Because that's not really all that strange. No one has yellow eyes. Coral is far more red than her lips. Well, okay, that sounds very insulting if you are looking for a standard love poem, but it's not very nice. If snow be white, then her breasts are dun. Okay, is this a note about complexion? Is this a note that she is not the fair-skinned that was traditionally referred to as attractive at the time? Well, okay. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. Well, that's like saying if hair is cloth, then black cloth grows on her head. It's just the word choice that makes it sound so much worse. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. Well, you've already talked about the fact that her complexion isn't pale. And in some perfumes, there is more delight. In some perfumes, not all perfumes, but some perfumes smell better than her breath. Now, you're getting into the problems when you throw the word reeks in, but outside of that, no, this is not your standard love poem. This is not your standard love sonnet. There is nothing particularly impressive about the individual being described here. Okay, great. We'll start there. The word mistress is employed here. This is where we get into a lot of the conjecture about whether or not Shakespeare is talking about his real life mistress, the woman to whom perhaps he devoted love, whereas he devoted his second best bed to his wife. Even in Shakespeare's time, from what I can tell, this word was multifaceted. Kind of all related, but multifaceted. It could mean beloved. Your mistress could be your missus, right? Your mistress, a mistress was also a woman of authority. A mistress was a term of respect, like Mr., mistress. So there's two right there. But much like today, mistress meant a sexual partner outside of your marriage. So there's three different ways that you can look at this word in this poem. We know Shakespeare loved to throw in multiple definitions of words, and whatever definition of that word, loved to throw in words with multiple definitions. And whatever definition of that word you chose, it changed the meaning of whatever it is that you were reading, but the meaning was still coherent. So, this poem could be to a beloved. This poem could be to an authority, though it makes less sense if it is. And it could be to a sexual partner outside of marriage. But I think in all three of those cases, really, at the core, what we're doing is neglecting the primary function of the poem as an artifact. Maybe not poetry in general, but the poem as an artifact is a metaphor. Most poetry is a metaphor, right? I'm not going to get into those arguments right now, but most poetry is a metaphor. Okay, great. So, is this poem a metaphor for Shakespeare's real-life mistress? Is this poem a metaphor for Shakespeare turning the sonnet on its head? No. No, that's not what a metaphor is. It's not what a metaphor does. The metaphor here means that Shakespeare is literally talking about a mistress, but figuratively talking about something else. So I want to take you to something a little bit different than what we normally do here. There is a song from the ancient Greek poet Eminem called 25 to Life. Eminem, also known by his American name, Marshall Mathers. In this song, I've taken a couple of the lyrics here. I feel like when I bend over backwards for you, too late, all you do is laugh, because that ain't good enough. You expect me to fold myself in half till I snap. Don't think I'm loyal, all I do is rap. How can I moonlight on the side? I have no life outside of that. So this song, don't I give you enough of my time? You don't think so, do you? Jealous when I spend time with the girls, why I'm married to you still. This song is talking to a woman. Whole song, start to finish, talking to a woman. Talking about how he has sacrificed so much for this woman. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't have a life outside of this woman. He does everything he can for this woman. This woman in the song 25 to Life by Marshall Mathers is his entire world. And then you get to the end, and what do we get? Well, you're screaming as I walk out that I'll be missed. But when you spoke of people who meant the most to you, you left me off your list. That would be awful for your lover to do that. F you, hip-hop. I'm leaving. My sentence is served B. So the whole song was set up to talk to a woman, but instead of a woman, he's actually talking to the form of hip-hop. And it's a bit of a cheap trick because he lets the jig up at the end, right? He gives up the gin. He says this is the metaphor of this song. It feels cheap because of that. But the point remains, the entire time he was personifying hip-hop as a woman and talking about the abusive relationship in which he found himself. I think that is something much more apt. Now, that song felt cheap, and if this poem, Sonnet 130, is to something so obvious as writing, perhaps that feels cheap as well. But, if we're being fair, now a poem about a rose feels cheap, and it's because we've seen it done a million times before. But there was a point in time when someone for the first time said, that rose is really beautiful. Hey baby, I'm going to write about this rose. But between you and me, every time I say rose, I mean you. Right? That happened for the first time at some point, so it was novel when it did. The metaphor in this poem, in my opinion, is almost definitely not about a person. I think that almost definitely what we're talking about, and yet by heaven, I think my love is rare as any she belied with false compare. I think that more likely than not, the core metaphor is that the woman in the poem, the mistress here said, is not a woman. What is it? Well, that much is yet to be seen. There's a lot of possibilities, obviously. I think it's interesting to think that Shakespeare could be talking about death. And if you are going, a lot of the talk around the metaphor being the mistress not being an actual person is around death. Obviously, it's a compelling argument here. Death would be ugly, but you know it's coming, so you might as well get used to the idea. You might as well fall in love. This couplet, I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. That becomes a special irony if this is talking about death. I think that there is a great probability that this is a poem about the muse. Eminem in 25 to Life talks about the fact that he has no life outside of rap. I think that anyone who finds themselves sufficiently creatively full, if you will, satisfied, if you will, as probably Shakespeare with his volumes of output did, you would feel as if you had no life outside of your craft. So I think that's possible. There was a lot of tragedy in Shakespeare's life. And many artists talk about the fact that there's a dark place they go in order to create. And they don't know what they would do without that dark place. They're a little scared that at some point they'll lose that dark place. A lot of artists, in interviews, you can read them, they say they're afraid to feel successful. They're afraid to feel as if they've made it. Because in the moment that they do, it might be that they lose that chip on their shoulder. What if that's what's going on here? This mistress is the dark place that Shakespeare knows he has to go in order to create. Creation being, writing being the way that he made his life, the way that he is still alive hundreds of years after his death. There's another one that I think is interesting to entertain, but perhaps not fair. In the biography portion of this video, I relayed the fact that it seems perhaps Shakespeare's last party went too well. Maybe he gave himself alcohol poisoning. Maybe he had a swelling of the brain. Something like this, right? Something where he was in the booze perhaps too deep. I believe this was true in Shakespeare's day. Maybe I'm wrong. There's a certain period in history where the going theory is, especially in large cities, everyone was kind of buzzed basically all the time because it wasn't safe to drink the water. So you drank beer, you drank wine, you drank mead. You were drinking liquor, if you were drinking anything. So, anyone who has had problems with the drink, anyone who has found themselves relying on the drink to be creative, and certainly anyone who has found themselves with a problem with the drink, the need to be creative, a career in creativity, and, well, the need to create, that would feel very much, I would imagine, like a helpless cycle. But God, it's fun. God, it's fun. It sure would feel like a mistress. So the mistress here seems to be that thing outside of, so the woman outside of marriage is the mistress. The marriage is the good life. The mistress is the fun life. Outside of the good, wholesome life you're supposed to live, you got a little bit of fun on the side. What if this poem is about alcohol? I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not making a conclusion. I'm just throwing it out there. What if old Billy Wigglestick really did like to tip? Anyway, guys, that's what I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers if you find yourself here by chance but not design. Literature is the only thing that I talk about on the channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.